Good day to everyone. Today, we will be discussing about the psychological perspective of the self. Psychology is derived from the two Greek words psyche, meaning the mind, soul or spirit, and logos, which means science or study. Psychology is a scientific study of the mind, how it works, and how it affects behavior. It is the field of social science that deals with the description, explanation, prediction, and control of behavior. James William James was an American philosopher and psychologist. He was a professor of psychology and philosophy at Harvard University and was known for being one of the great pragmatists. He is also known for his theory of the self. He wrote many articles in both philosophy and psychology and published several books, one of which is The Principles of Psychology in 1890. It is in this book where his theory of the self is explained. James' theory of the self divided a person's mental picture of self into two categories, the I and the me. The me can be thought of as a separate object or individual a person refers to when describing their personal experiences, while the I of the self knows who they are and what they have done in their life. He called the me part of the self the empirical me, and the I part the pure ego. Educational theorists have been inspired in the various ways by James' theory of the self and have developed various applications to curricular and pedagogical theory of and practice. The me self is further divided into three components, namely the material self, the social self, and the spiritual self. The material self consists of things that belong to a person or entity that a person belongs to. Thus, things like the body, family, clothes, money, and such make up the material self. The core of the material self was the body. Second to the body is the person's clothes. A person's clothes were used to express themselves or a way to show status, thus contributing to forming and maintaining one's self-image. Money and family are a critical part of the material self. If one lost a family member, a part of who they are was also lost. Our social selves are who we are in a given social situation. People change how they act depending on the social situation that they are in. For example, a person may act in a different way at classroom when compared to how the same person may act when they are out with a group of friends. In a given social group, an individual's social self may be divided even further. An example of this would be in the social context of an individual's school environment, the difference in behavior when the individual is interacting with their professors versus their behavior when interacting with a classmate. And the last, the spiritual self. This was who we are at our core. It is more concrete and permanent than the other two selves. The spiritual self is our subjective and most intimate self. Aspects of spiritual selves include personality, core values, and conscience that do not typically change throughout an individual's life. The spiritual self involves introspection, or looking inward to deeper spiritual, moral, or intellectual questions without the influence of objective thoughts. Murray Bowen Murray Bowen was an American psychiatrist and a professor in psychiatry. He was among those who developed the family therapy and systematic therapy. He came up with the concept of a differentiated self. In this theory, he observed that there are two forces affecting a person. The first is togetherness, and the second is individuality. A balance should be maintained between these two forces, for too much togetherness creates friction and conflict and prevents the development of person's sense of self. Too much individuality, on the other hand, results in distant and strange feelings towards family and other people. A differentiated self, though still affects affected by the presence of others, has the ability to separate feelings and thoughts. The person recognizes that he has his own personality and therefore endowed with unique characteristics not found in other members of the group. With this knowledge, he realized that for him to attain self-fulfillment, he should have the will to separate himself from the group, live his own life, and fulfill his destiny. Being able to free himself from the influence of others allows him to define himself. By differentiating from unwanted influence in the people and in the environment, he can be who he truly is rather than take on the identity that is prescribed by the family or society. The differentiated self enables the person to develop and sustain his unique identity, make his own choices, and accept responsibility for his behavior, and still be able to stay emotionally connected with his family and friends. Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was an American psychologist who proposed the personality theory known as the person-centered theory. He stated that the self concept is used to refer how a person thinks about or perceives himself. There are two types of self concept: the real self and the ideal self. The real self refers to all information and perception the person has about himself. This is who he actually is and answers the question, "Who am I?" The ideal self is the model version of the person has of himself. This idealized view was born out of his experiences, standards, and demands of society, and the heroes and models which he chooses to imitate. In short, the ideal self is what the person aims for himself to be. It answers the question of who he wants to become or who do I want to be. Rogers stated that there should be a congruence between the real self and the ideal self in order for the person to be happy and satisfied with his life. If the real self is very different from the ideal self, then the person will experience dissatisfaction and may see himself as a failure or a loser. Donald Woods Winnicott. Donald Woods Winnicott was an English pediatrician and psychoanalyst who studied child development. He observed children and people having true and false selves. The true self in individuals is the one in which the self is seen as creative, spontaneously experiencing each day of their lives, appreciating being alive, real, integrated, and connected to the whole of existence. The false self may be manifested as a form of defense. It is the mask that hides the person for fear of the pain of rejection and failure. According to Winnicott, true and false selves are present in all individuals. For the two to exist in a healthy individual, they should be functional for the advantage of both the person himself and his society. A person that struggles to fit in but still experiences the feeling of being forced to comply, rather than adapting gracefully to the situation, is a person whose self is maladjusted and unhealthy. Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura is the proponent of the personality theory known as the social cognitive theory. In this theory, the person is seen as proactive and agentic, which means that he has the capacity to exercise control over his life. In this triadic reciprocal causation paradigm, he explains how human beings are affected by the interaction among environmental events, behavior, and personal factors. In this theory, the basic principle involved in human learning is learning through observation. Bandura's social cognitive theory of human functioning emphasizes the critical role of self-beliefs in human cognition, motivation, and behavior. Social cognitive theory gives prominence to a self-system that enables individuals to exercise a measure of control over their thoughts, feelings, and actions. In putting forth of this view, Bandura reinvigorated the nearly abandoned focus on the self in the study of human processes that William James initiated nearly a century earlier. Social cognitive theory is an agentic and empowering psychological perspective in which individuals are proactive and self-regulating rather than reactive and controlled either by environmental or biological forces. Instead, the beliefs that people have about themselves are key elements in their exercise of control and of personal, cultural, and social achievement. It is because of their beliefs about their own capabilities, their self-efficacy beliefs, that people are able to exercise their self-influence required to contribute to the types of persons they become and their achievements. In the social cognitive theory, Bandura discusses the four features of human agency, namely the intentionality, the forethought, self-reflectiveness, and self-reactiveness. First, intentionality. This refers to the actions performed by the person intentionally or with full awareness of his behavior. This feature involves planning with awareness of the possible consequences of actions. For example, I went online to apply for a passport because I wanted to travel outside of this country. Second is the forethought. This refers to the person's anticipation of likely outcomes of his behavior. This allows him to select from a repertoire of behaviors and determine which one will most likely lead a positive outcome. For example, Kenneth chose an interview date for his passport application where most likely he will be on leave. Third, self-reactiveness. This refers to the process in which the person is motivated and regulates his behavior as he observes his progress in achieving his goals. The goals that a person wants to reach should be clear and specific. It should also be within his ability to achieve. The person should be realistic, aware of his potentials and capabilities to fulfill his goals. For example, Angeline saves a larger portion of her salary in the bank so she can have enough cash to travel to Japan. And lastly, self-reflectiveness. This refers to the person looking inward and evaluating his motivations, values, life goals, and other people's effect on him. An important aspect of self-reflectiveness is self-efficacy, which is the person's belief that he is capable of behavior that will produce the desired positive results. For example, Erica believes that she has to enjoy and experience life little while still able and capable.